Have you ever sat quietly in your living room trying to recall a familiar name, only to feel it slipping away like sand through your fingers? Or found yourself mid-sentence, forgetting what you meant to say next? If that's ever happened to you, please stay with me. By the time you finish this video, about 20 older adults in America will have been diagnosed with dementia. That's one person every 66 seconds losing a piece of their memory. But here's the hard truth. It's not just aging. Some of the medications sitting in your cabinet right now, the ones your doctor said were safe, the ones you've taken for years, might actually be harming your brain. New research shows that several common drugs can silently shrink parts of the brain responsible for memory, emotion, and recognition. Some studies found a 28% reduction in brain volume in less than a year, and pharmaceutical companies, they've known for decades, but they stayed silent, because those same drugs bring in billions of dollars each year, while millions of older adults slowly lose clarity, independence, and the very memories that make them who they are. Today on The Elderly Way, we're revealing 9 prescription drugs that may quietly damage your brain, ranked from least to most dangerous. And number 3, it's given to millions of people to treat something minor, but its long-term effects on the brain are anything but minor. If you care about your memory, your mental sharpness, your future, leave a comment below. What medications are you taking every day? Have you ever noticed foggy thinking or unusual forgetfulness? I read every comment, and if I can help you understand what's happening, I will. Not as an expert, but as an old friend who's walked this road too. Because if we don't speak up for ourselves, no one else will. That's why this channel exists. The Elderly Way is about choosing a path that protects your clarity, your dignity, and your mind. Number 9. Diphenhydramine, the pink pill that may be dimming your memory day by day. If there's one medication I personally underestimated, it was Benadryl. I used to tell myself, it's just for allergies, just something to help me sleep. No big deal. But I was wrong, and I wish I had known sooner. Diphenhydramine may sound unfamiliar, but it's the active ingredient in that little pink Benadryl pill so many of us have trusted for years. You'll also find it under names like Allergy PM, Nighttime Cold and Flu, or Sleep Aid. It's cheap, it's on every shelf, and it doesn't need a prescription, so most older adults assume it's harmless. But behind that convenience lies a serious risk. Diphenhydramine belongs to a class of medications called anticholinergics. These drugs block acetylcholine, a critical brain chemical responsible for memory formation, mental alertness, and overall cognitive function. Here's the problem. After age 60, your brain already produces less acetylcholine naturally. Think of your brain like a lamp running low on oil, and every dose of Benadryl is like someone quietly blowing out the flame. The damage doesn't happen overnight. It starts with forgetting someone's name, losing your train of thought mid-conversation, walking into a room and wondering why you went there, and you chalk it up to aging, when in fact it could be that sleep aid you took last night working against your brain. A 2023 study found that seniors who regularly took anticholinergic medications had a 54% higher risk of developing dementia. That risk increased even more if they also had insomnia, depression, or high blood pressure. In other words, a few nights of poor sleep could set off a chain of memory loss that you may not be able to reverse. So what can you do? First, check your medicine cabinet. Look for labels that say PM, nighttime, allergy relief, or any product that contains diphenhydramine. Be cautious. Next, talk to your doctor or pharmacist about safer alternatives. One common choice is loratadine Claritin. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, so it won't interfere with your memory over time. And most importantly, never stop a medication abruptly, but never assume an over-the-counter drug is harmless either. Here at The Elderly Way, we believe that aging shouldn't mean confusion, fog, or forgetting the faces you love. You deserve to stay clear, sharp, and fully present in every moment. If you're currently taking Benadryl or something similar, share your story in the comments. You are not alone, and sometimes the right piece of information at the right time can change everything. Number 8. Proton pump inhibitors, PPI. They calm your stomach but may quietly harm your brain. There's a class of medication that many older adults take daily for years, even decades, believing it's harmless. It soothes the stomach, eases heartburn, and helps with digestion. That class is proton pump inhibitors, or PPI. You may know them by their common names: Prilosec, Nexium, Prevacid. These drugs are widely prescribed to treat acid reflux, GERD, ulcers, and frequent heartburn. I personally took Prilosec every morning for almost 5 years. It made eating easier, sleeping more comfortable. But what I didn't know was that it might have been quietly unraveling connections in my brain. PPIs work by reducing stomach acid, which sounds good if you suffer from reflux. But here's the thing: stomach acid isn't just for digestion. It helps your body absorb critical nutrients, especially vitamin B12. And B12 is vital for protecting the brain, maintaining nerve insulation, myelin, and supporting memory and focus. Without it, you can feel fatigued, foggy, depressed, or even disoriented. And PPI, they block B12 absorption. A major 2016 study published in JAMA Neurology, tracking over 73,000 adults aged 75 and older, found that regular PPI users had a 44% higher risk of developing dementia than non-users. But it doesn't stop at B12. PPIs also reduce absorption of magnesium and calcium, two minerals essential for nerve signaling in the brain. Without them, neurons struggle to communicate, leading to confusion, distraction, and symptoms that mimic early Alzheimer's. And even more troubling, some studies suggest that PPIs increase the accumulation of amyloid beta in the brain, a toxic protein believed to be a key trigger in the development of Alzheimer's disease. So the pill that soothes your heartburn might also be quietly damaging your memory day by day. What can you do? First, do not stop your medication abruptly. That could make symptoms worse. But talk to your doctor about gradually reducing your dose, or switching to a gentler alternative like famotidine Pepcid, a type of H2 blocker that appears to be safer for brain health. Second, you may consider natural digestive supports, such as diglycerhyzinated licorice, DGL, a herbal compound that helps soothe the stomach lining without interfering with nutrient absorption. And if you've been taking PPIs for a long time, ask your doctor to check your B12, magnesium, and calcium levels. You may need supplements to protect your brain. At the Elderly Way, we believe enjoying a meal is important, but preserving your clarity is priceless. Don't let short-term comfort steal your long-term memory. Number 7. Oxybutynin treats bladder issues but may steal your memory. Nobody wants to live in fear of accidents or rushing to the bathroom. For many older adults, urinary incontinence isn't just a nuisance. It's something that affects confidence, sleep, and social life. That's why oxybutynin, brand name Ditropan, is often prescribed as a quick fix for overactive bladder. But what few people realize is that this solution may be one of the most memory-damaging drugs older adults take. I remember a friend from church, Susan, 72, who started oxybutynin after bladder issues made her hesitant to go out. Just months later, she told me she was forgetting simple things, couldn't recall if she locked the door, had trouble following conversations. At first, she thought it was just aging, but it wasn't. It was her medication. Oxybutynin is a strong anticholinergic. Like Benadryl, it blocks acetylcholine, the brain chemical essential for memory, alertness, and learning. But unlike most drugs, oxybutynin crosses the blood-brain barrier easily, directly affecting the hippocampus, the memory center of the brain. A 2019 study published in BMJ, British Medical Journal, tracked thousands of adults over 65 and found those who took oxybutynin or other strong anticholinergics for more than a year had a 49% higher risk of developing dementia. That's nearly 1 in 2. And the worst part, most patients are never warned. They're told it helps with bladder control, but not that it might slow their thinking, cloud their memory, or chip away at their independence. The symptoms often mimic normal aging: missed appointments, misplaced items, trouble following conversations. But by the time these signs appear, the damage may already be underway. If you're taking oxybutynin and noticing changes in memory or mental sharpness, don't brush it off. You deserve clarity. You don't have to trade your mind to manage your bladder. The good news: There are safer alternatives now. One example is Mirabegron, brand name Miobetriq. This newer medication works through a different pathway, doesn't interfere with acetylcholine, and is much more memory-friendly for older adults. Talk to your doctor, review your medication list. If your mind doesn't feel the way it used to, look first at your prescriptions. At the Elderly Way, we believe you should never have to choose between dignity and clarity. There is always another way, a safer way. Number 6. Statins lower your cholesterol but may also slow your memory. Statins are among the most commonly prescribed drugs in the world, especially for those over 60. If you've ever been told your cholesterol is high or you're at risk of heart attack or stroke, chances are your doctor has mentioned simvastatin Zocker or atorvastatin Lipitor. Statins do reduce cardiovascular risk, but what many people don't realize is this: they may also quietly affect your brain. I used to think cholesterol was something to lower as much as possible, but I didn't know back then that the brain actually needs cholesterol to function, desperately. Over 60% of the brain is made of fat, and cholesterol is a key building block for the myelin sheath, the protective coating that helps nerve signals travel quickly and clearly. When statins suppress cholesterol too much, especially over long periods and in high doses, your brain may be starved of a crucial resource. Like an engine running without oil, it starts to misfire. A 2023 study published in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience found adults over 70 who took statins for more than 3 years had a 26% higher risk of mild cognitive impairment. That means more than 1 in 4 users could be affected. Some patients report sudden memory lapses, forgetting familiar names, or even getting lost in their own neighborhood. But here's the important part. Not all statins affect the brain the same way. Types like pravastatin and rosuvastatin are less likely to cross the blood-brain barrier, and therefore are less likely to cause memory-related side effects compared to simvastatin or atorvastatin. So if you've been on statins for years and have noticed foggy thinking, forgetfulness, or mental confusion, pay attention to those signs. Talk to your doctor about reducing your dosage, switching to a statin that's easier on the brain, or using lifestyle changes to naturally support cholesterol levels. Don't wait until the damage becomes harder to reverse. At the Elderly Way, we believe early awareness is the smartest form of self-care, because while a strong heart is essential, a clear mind is everything. Number 5. Benzodiazepines help you sleep but may also put your brain to sleep for good. If you've ever struggled with anxiety, panic, or sleepless nights, chances are your doctor may have handed you a little white pill Ativan, Valium, or Xanax. These are part of the benzodiazepine family. At first, they seem like a miracle. They calm the racing thoughts, reduce panic, and help you finally get the rest you desperately need. I understand. I once believed that one little pill wouldn't hurt. But over time, I learned the cost to your brain can be greater than you think. Benzodiazepines work by enhancing GABA, a brain chemical that slows down nerve activity. Initially, this creates a peaceful, quieting effect on the mind. But the longer you take them, the more your brain depends on that artificial calm. Eventually, the brain stops regulating itself. A 2022 study published in BMJ followed over 8,000 older adults for 6 years. It found those who used benzodiazepines for more than 3 months had a 51% higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Even more alarming, long-acting types like diazepam, Valium, tend to accumulate in fat tissue, including brain tissue, making their effects slower but deeper and more damaging. What's really happening inside the brain? The brain enters a state of chemical sleep. Neural activity slows too much. Learning and memory functions become impaired. People begin to feel foggy, detached, confused, like they're no longer themselves. Many older adults describe it as living in a mental haze, disconnected from reality, like watching life happen through frosted glass. Even worse, when they try to stop the medication, intense withdrawal symptoms like rebound anxiety, agitation, and severe insomnia often kick in. This makes them believe they need the drug to function when in truth, the drug is causing the very symptoms they're trying to fix. So what's the safer path? First and foremost, never stop benzodiazepines abruptly. This can be dangerous, even life-threatening. Work closely with your doctor on a gradual tapering plan, which may take weeks or even months depending on how long you've been on the medication. During this time, you might switch to safer options like Buspirone, a non-sedating anti-anxiety medication that doesn't harm memory; cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a proven long-term approach for anxiety and insomnia without damaging the brain. At the Elderly Way, we believe you deserve peace of mind without sacrificing your identity, your clarity, or your precious memories. Don't let a pill steal who you are. There's a gentler way forward, and you don't have to walk it alone. Number 4. Amitriptyline, an old antidepressant that may quietly erode your memory every night. Amitriptyline, also known by the brand name Elavil, is a medication that's been around for decades. Though originally developed as an antidepressant, it's still widely prescribed today for nerve pain, insomnia, and migraines, especially in older adults. For many, it seems like a catch-all pill, helping with sleep, easing pain, and even lifting mood. But here's the problem almost no one talks about. Amitriptyline is one of the most powerful anticholinergic drugs still in use. That means it strongly blocks acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter your brain needs for memory, alertness, and communication between nerve cells, and the effect on cognition. It's not just possible, it's nearly guaranteed if taken long-term. A 2015 study published in JAMA Internal Medicine tracked more than 400 adults over age 65 for 10 years. They found those who took high doses of anticholinergic drugs like amitriptyline had a 54% higher risk of developing dementia, not a slight increase, more than 1 in 2. Even more concerning, most patients are never warned. They're told the drug will help them sleep or ease nerve pain, without being told it may also quietly damage their memory night after night. Long-term users often describe forgetting things that just happened, struggling to find words, feeling mentally foggy or slower than before. Even low doses taken nightly, like 10 mg to help with sleep, can still subtly impair memory over time. And because the changes happen slowly, many people assume it's just part of getting older. So what can you do? If you or a loved one is taking amitriptyline, talk to your doctor about safer alternatives based on your condition. For nerve pain, consider switching to duloxetine or gabapentin. Both tend to have fewer cognitive side effects. For insomnia, try melatonin or low-dose doxepin, which has far milder anticholinergic effects. For depression, newer medications like sertraline or escitalopram are generally much safer for older adults. At the Elderly Way, we always say, sleep is precious, but your memory is priceless. Take a closer look at your prescriptions, and don't hesitate to ask, is there a safer way for my brain? Number 3. Paroxetine, a gentle antidepressant that may quietly harm your memory. Paroxetine, brand name Paxil, is a familiar SRI selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, one of the most prescribed types of antidepressants today. Most doctors believe SRI are safer for older adults than older generation antidepressants. And that's generally true, except for paroxetine. What many people don't realize, including some health professionals, is that paroxetine is the only SRI with significant anticholinergic properties. That means, in addition to affecting serotonin, the feel-good hormone, it interferes with acetylcholine, a brain chemical crucial for memory, alertness, and learning. This makes paroxetine very different from safer SRI like sertraline or escitalopram. A 2021 meta-analysis, published in Frontiers in Psychiatry, revealed that older adults taking paroxetine for just 12 months experienced notable declines in short-term memory, verbal recall, and concentration. Even more concerning, their risk of early cognitive decline increased by 30% compared to those on other antidepressants. In other words, paroxetine may improve mood, but at the cost of mental clarity, emotional regulation, and focus. Some patients describe feeling disoriented, forgetful, mentally foggy, or emotionally flat. Sadly, these symptoms are often mistaken for depression itself, leading to continued use of the drug and a downward spiral. But there's a clear and necessary solution. Paroxetine is on the Beers list, a guide created by the American Geriatric Society, which highlights medications that should be avoided in older adults. If you're taking paroxetine, talk to your doctor about switching to sertraline, well tolerated with fewer cognitive side effects; escitalopram, gentle, effective, and safer for the aging brain. Also consider supplementing with B vitamins, especially B12 and B6, to naturally support brain health and emotional balance. At the Elderly Way, we believe treating depression is vital, but never at the expense of memory, clarity, or identity, because a lifted mood is only meaningful if your mind remains sharp. Number 2. Antipsychotics when calming medication turns loved ones into a quiet shadow. Quetiapine, Seroquel, risperidone, Risperdal, olanzapine, Zyprexa. These drugs were originally developed for serious mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. But today, they are often prescribed to older adults for off-label reasons, especially to manage agitation, insomnia, or behavioral changes related to dementia. On the surface, it may seem like a reasonable solution, but the consequences can be profound and devastating. A 2022 study published in the Lancet Healthy Longevity followed over 25,000 older adults. It found that older adults prescribed antipsychotics for behavioral control had a 71% higher risk of severe cognitive decline within just 12 months, even if they had no history of dementia. But that's not all. These drugs also significantly increase the risk of stroke, cause excessive sedation, right arrow falls, hospitalizations, raise the chance of sudden death in elderly patients. Why? Because antipsychotics suppress dopamine, a vital brain chemical involved in motivation, emotional regulation, and memory. When dopamine levels plummet, the brain becomes sluggish, detached, and unable to adapt. Loved ones often begin to show signs of slowed speech and movement, emotional flatness, disinterest in surroundings, a loss of personality, like they're still here but no longer themselves. Many families describe their loved one as a ghost of who they once were, not knowing that the real culprit isn't aging but a chemical that was meant to calm, not erase. So what can you do? Start by asking the simplest and most important question. Why was this medication prescribed? Is it truly necessary, or was it given as a quick fix for difficult behavior? Often these behaviors can be addressed without medication through establishing consistent daily routines, reducing loud noises and bright lights, identifying and treating sources of discomfort or pain, encouraging gentle communication and reassurance, supporting natural sleep habits. If medication is absolutely necessary, ask for the lowest effective dose, the shortest duration possible, regular reviews of memory, mood, and mobility. Most importantly, review your loved one's medication list. Many families are unaware that their parent or spouse is on an antipsychotic. They only notice the gradual change, without realizing the drug may be the reason. At the Elderly Way, we believe older adults deserve care built on dignity, not chemical sedation. You can help your loved one come back to life by starting with one courageous question. Number 1. The cumulative danger of anticholinergic drugs, the hidden threat quietly shutting your brain down. You might expect the number 1 spot on this list to be reserved for a single dangerous pill, the worst offender of them all, but that's not the case. The greatest threat to memory isn't one drug, it's the silent, compounding effect of many. This is known as anticholinergic polypharmacy. I once met Mr. Frank, 78, who lived just a few blocks away. He took Benadryl at night to sleep, oxybutynin during the day for bladder control, and amitriptyline for nerve pain. Individually, each medication might only mildly affect memory, but together they created a burden his brain couldn't carry. This is not theoretical. A 2022 analysis published in Age and Aging tracked more than 280,000 older adults over a decade. It found that those with the highest anticholinergic burden had a 120% increased risk of dementia. That's more than double the risk. And here's the alarming part. Most patients don't even know they're taking anticholinergic drugs. There's no obvious warning label, no clear explanation from the doctor. These are common, familiar medications. When acetylcholine is blocked from multiple sources, the brain doesn't just slow down, it starts to physically deteriorate. Neurons shrink from lack of stimulation, synapses wither and disconnect. The brain falls into a sluggish state that mimics Alzheimer's disease. But here's the good news: this kind of cognitive decline is reversible. You don't need a miracle, just a closer look at your medication list. The solution: ask your doctor or pharmacist to review every medication you're taking. Prescription drugs, over-the-counter pills, supplements. They can use special software or online tools to calculate your total anticholinergic burden. Based on that, you and your doctor can gradually reduce or eliminate unnecessary medications. Switch to brain-friendly alternatives. Support your brain's recovery with the right nutrients. And this is the most important point of the entire video. Drug-induced dementia is the only type that's fully reversible. When the chemical burden is lifted, many older adults regain clarity, memory, and even emotional connection, often in just weeks or months. Your brain can heal if you give it the chance. Anticholinergic polypharmacy isn't just a hidden threat, it's the #1 preventable cause of memory loss in older adults today. At the Elderly Way, we believe aging shouldn't mean fading away. You deserve to stay present, alert, and truly alive for every moment you still have. And sometimes, it all begins with one simple question to your doctor. Is anything I'm taking harming my memory? Protect your memory, starting with one small step today. Every year, millions of older adults face cognitive decline, and the heartbreaking truth is, many of those cases aren't due to aging, but to what's sitting in their medicine cabinet. From allergy pills to sleep aids, nerve pain medications, reflux drugs, and bladder control treatments. Many seemingly harmless medications may be slowly damaging your memory. Even worse, it's the combination, the hidden anticholinergic burden, that poses the greatest risk. Just a little from each drug and suddenly your brain is under siege, doubling your risk of memory loss without you even knowing why. But here's the good news: this is preventable. In many cases, it's even reversible, if caught early and handled properly. So here's what you can do starting today. Review every medication you're currently taking. Schedule an appointment with your doctor or pharmacist to assess your memory risk. Ask about safer alternatives that protect your brain. And most importantly, don't stay silent if you feel like your mind isn't as sharp as it used to be. Your memory is priceless. It holds who you are, what you love, and every story you've lived. Don't let it slip away, especially not because of something avoidable. At the Elderly Way, we're walking this path with you toward more clarity, more strength, and more control. If this video helped you, leave a comment, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to our channel for more ways to protect your mind and your life at any age.